今天线上连入的大咖是凯文凯利。Welcome to Cyber Talk. It's great to have you on our show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I just finished reading your new book, 2049, and you depicted some very bold scenarios about how AI is going to change the world. But I want to start with a smaller and more personal question. You obviously know a lot of, powerful tech people in Silicon Valley. I wonder how they're using AI right now that are different from us, because they're the ones building powerful AI.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think they are. My impression is that on a daily basis, they're very much newbies like us, that we're all kind of newbies who are trying out the things and trying to figure out what they mean and trying to figure out what they're beneficial to and trying to figure out what their harms are. So my impression from talking to them is that they are not further along in their usage of it than, say, my son is, right? Mm-hmm. Who's just a 29-year-old. So that's my impression.
I often think about how AI could help me improve what I do, and also how many aspects of what I do now can be replaced by AI. But in your book, contrary to a lot of people's fear, you don't seem to think AI is going to make us jobless. By that, do you mean AI is not going to replace most of our jobs, or there will be new jobs coming up in the AI era?
There'll be new jobs. There'll be a very, very precious few jobs eliminated, but most jobs are actually bundles of tasks. So there'll be a lot of tasks that are eliminated. But people's jobs will change because they'll have new tasks. And in most of the tasks that they will have will be managing AIs. And there's a third thing besides the enjoyment of the audience of one and the management. The main job we will have is to take on trust and responsibility. When you are hired by a company as a worker, as an employee, you have kind of two main functions. One is to do the work, and the second one is to be responsible for doing the work. So AIs don't have any responsibility. They can't take, like if I go and ask an AI to do something and it doesn't do it, I'm taking the risk. I have to do it. I'll have to fill it out. The AI is not going to say, "Oh, I'll keep working until you're happy." No, it doesn't have any responsibility, and you can't trust it. You're selling responsibility. You're selling trust to your employer. The AIs cannot give. So that's the third thing. And then the fourth thing that we have as humans, one of the most valuable things we have as humans, is simply that we're human. And we like the human touch. We like to hang out with humans. We would prefer to hang out with a human over a machine. Even though we may have lots of machines in our lives, we are most at ease with humans. And I think what the rich are going to do in even 25 years from now is not deal with AIs. The more money you have, the less you are going to deal with AI directly. You're going to hire human assistants who are going to deal with the AI. And so if you can afford it, you will only deal with humans, but it'll become very expensive. And people will charge more because they're going to be human versus having a machine do it.
So are you saying that the rich people will be AI free, and then the middle class people in the middle, they would be managing AI? Are there any jobs left for blue collar workers?
Yeah. In fact, there's a little joke in Silicon Valley which says we have been planning or imagining that we're going to hire the robots to do our plumbing so that we can write poetry and make art. But in fact, the robots are going to make art and we're going to do the plumbing because they can't do plumbing. A lot of the blue collar jobs are some of the most difficult jobs that AIs and robots have. They find it very, very, very difficult to do. I don't know, maybe 50 years, 100 years before there's a robot that could come in and fix the plumbing under your sink. It is the dexterity and the strength and the intelligence of the human hand doing that is really beyond belief. There could be a robot that could do one part of it, but not a single robot that could do all of it. So the blue collar jobs, some of them, electrician wiring things, they have a great future.
All right. But I'd like to give you a scenario. You know, in China, there are more than 40 million taxi drivers, bus drivers, and truck drivers. When autonomous driving cars come along, their jobs are probably going to be replaced. And then there are also roughly 6 million delivery men in China. With automated cars and robots, their jobs are probably going to disappear too. And then, you know, there are a lot of factory workers in China as well. I just can't imagine how there are enough new jobs in the AI era for these people.
Yeah, well, several things. One is, yes, I think the driving jobs will transition out over time. And there will be a transition period. The trucks are driving by themselves, but there is a human inside who is not working full time on driving, but is doing other work in the cabin on their computer. And they are called for just the tricky parts of the driving on the truck. But the rest of the time, they're doing white collar work. They're connected. They've got their computer screens. They're doing something else. So that will take a decade to go through. So there's a decade for the people to get new jobs. And I think it does seem hard to imagine, because even in China's history is like you can go back 20 years when most of the citizens were farmers. And you would tell them in 20 years from now, only 5% of you are going to be farming. 95% of you are going to have new jobs. And they're going to say, what? What could I possibly do? What could people be doing? And you say, oh, you'll be a mortgage broker, or you'll be a yoga instructor, or you'll be doing nails or stuff. And it's like, those were just inconceivable. And so I think there's going to be a huge number of repair jobs, robot repair. If there are as many robot-driven trucks and stuff, they all need to be repaired. That's a job that the robots are not going to be doing for a long time. So a lot of the truck drivers will turn into truck repair people.
Speaking of robot repair jobs, Elon Musk famously said he thinks there will be 3 times more robots than human beings on Earth. Do you agree with his prediction?
Well, yes, but not in 25 years.
But eventually.
Yes, there'll be billions more. What happens is that almost anything that moves, we'll give autonomy to, and we'll call it a robot. So don't think of robots as only humanoid. Think of them as a machine that has some autonomy to do its task. And in that sense, there'll be billions of robots.
I was just going to ask you that. What percentage of robots will be humanoid?
In the long term, very few. Most of the technology in our lives is old technology, and we never think about it. It's invisible. And that's a success story. Technologies succeed by becoming invisible. We only think about them when they break down or don't work. So we have electrical, plumbing, we've got roads, we've got concrete, we've got all these things. They're all technologies, but we don't think about them because they're invisible and they always work. Most of the robots in the future will be the same way. They'll be working behind the scenes. We're not even thinking about them. We don't even realize they're there. We don't see them. Only a very small percentage of the kinds of AIs and robots, and that's true for AI too, will be facing us. And those are the only ones that need to look like us or to be like human scaled. The rest of them don't even need to be anything like us. It's only the few that will be close to us that will deal with us. And we just don't want or need to have that many around us. And so, relatively speaking, there'll be a relative few. And also, there'll be a high cost for that. The energy necessary is incredibly challenging to have a humanoid run all day. The flexibility and the quality of the technology is of the highest quality. So they will be generally very expensive. I think, I don't know, less than 1% of the robots will be humanoid.
You also said in the book that productivity would be reserved for machines and robots. And in the future, we should focus more on things that don't require us to be very efficient, like making art, philosophy,
science, innovation, entrepreneurship. Those are all incredibly inefficient. If you want to be creative in any way, technically creative, you have to be inefficient. You have to make mistakes. You have to try things that don't work. You have to endure dead ends and failure. There's no progress without failures, which is inefficient. If you're just going to do things that always work, you won't learn anything. So the most important things in our lives, including the things we love the most, all inefficient. Small talk is inefficient. I mean, this conversation right now is incredibly inefficient. Right? But that's the beauty of it. And so we are going to be gravitating to all those things where efficiency doesn't really matter.
What a romantic notion. I know you have 3 children. What kinds of jobs do you think they'll be interested in the AI era?
Yeah, it's a great course. So my eldest daughter works for Anthropic. My son is a coder working for an AI company. And my second daughter is a strategist who's doing branding strategy, which is a new occupation. For a while, she was an experienced designer. That's what her card said. So it's proof that if you're graduating from school, the job that you will have in 4 years does not exist now. We'll invent it in 4 years. And that's a good thing. And my advice to a young person is you want to be working on in an area where there's no words for what it is that you do, where it takes you 15 minutes to explain to your parents what you actually do. That's a good sign. That means that you're out front and the language will have to catch up to you.
How interesting. You know, for the longest time, parents would tell us that being doctors and lawyers are great jobs. In the AI era, what would be considered great jobs? You just said something that can't be described, but could you try to put it in words, some of the new jobs that would be exciting to have?
In AI, the exciting jobs are not going to be the programming because they're going to do it. So it's going to be the AI therapist. I don't mean being a therapist. I mean the therapist for the AIs. Okay? They're going to have mental health issues. And they will be experts who will be very good at discerning what ails an AI, why it's giving people depressing answers. And so you will have people who will be therapists. Another AI-related job will be the curricula advisor for AIs. AIs, as they increasingly get bigger and bigger, have to be educated. Educated meaning they have to go through curriculum. They have to start off with simple things when they're being trained. When a new model is being trained, they have to train it first on the simplest things. And then you have to introduce more and more complicated things. There'll be different expertise and different approaches to educating the AIs to arrive at a different kind of intelligence. So there will be people who specialize in training AIs in certain directions, including, let's say they want a conservative AI that gives conservative answers, or maybe they want an AI that would adhere to the CCP's general regime. So you will train it and you become expert at having you take it through and arrive at a certain kind of knowledge and intelligence. So that's a job.
But wouldn't it be weird? Like, why don't we use these human wisdom to train AI to make machines better and not, directly train people to be better?
That's the thing. Because once we start doing with AI, we will understand that we can do it to humans, and that will make teaching better. The thing about AIs is that they are going to make us better humans, because another job is teaching ethical morality to AIs, giving them moral guidance. Well, the problem is that's easy to do. The difficulty is that we don't have a very good system to teach AIs. Our own morality is very uneven and very shallow, but we aren't satisfied. We want the AIs to be better than us. ethically. So to teach them how to be better than us requires us to become really good at ethical morality, which will then enable us to actually teach ourselves or our children. So the byproduct of having to educate AIs is that we will educate our own humans better. It kind of forces us to be more scientific and rigorous in it, whereas we were never forced to before. It's like you've heard about the trolley problem, right? I mean, there's a famous philosophical dilemma called the trolley problem, which is, the trolley's coming down. Do you have it kill one person or 5 people? That's often translated into self-driving car. It's like, should the car favor the passenger protecting the safety or the pedestrians? When humans drive, we don't force ourselves to make that decision. We say, oh, it depends. Who knows? But the AIs, they can't. We have to actually tell them, if there's something happening, do you favor the safety of the passenger over the pedestrian? And so we can't give ourselves a pass. I mean, we actually have to answer that question, which forces us to have a better morality than we did before, because the AIs demand that we have better. And then once we have that, then we can teach our kids, say, here's our answer. Here's what we decided. You favor the passenger. Okay. And so that's an example of how we use AI to make education eventually even better for humans as we try to teach them better.
Will that leave very little room for uncertainty? Will that be a good thing?
I don't think it eliminates uncertainty. I think there's going to be more uncertainty as we go forward. Right now, the thing about the AIs is incredibly uncertain. There's like 2 central uncertainties where the smartest people on the planet, the smartest designers of AI disagree. That's a huge uncertainty. And I think there's going to be plenty more uncertainty ahead of us. So I don't see it taking away uncertainty.
Let's talk about AI personal assistant. You think everyone is going to have a capable AI assistant in the future, but to what extent do you think these AI assistants could help us? Is it going to be like Jarvis in Iron Man? Or is it going to, just help us do basic tasks? What is it going to be like?
It'll be different for different people. And one of the things I would say is that we will have the choice of maybe hundreds of different kinds of assistants. And each of them will have a slightly different personality and different strengths. Be it like buying not just phones, but a car. There are multiple models of cars. Why does somebody buy a Volvo versus a Mercedes versus a Tesla? Because they have different ideas of themselves. They have different personalities. They have different uses of how they use a car. And the same thing with these assistants. There'll be some people who like a chatty assistant and others who can't stand a chatty assistant. Some who like an assistant that does everything that's the same one, even if they don't do everything as well as a specialist. And there are others who want to deal only with specialists, very best in each one. So there's going to be lots of different methods and approaches to them. Each one of them, there is a skill.
Right.
We know that from AI already, is that there is a skill in dealing with the AI. Just as there's a skill in managing people. Some people are better at it and some people can get better at it. And other people should not be managing people. Okay. And so managing AIs and having an intern will be a skill like other things where you have to learn how to do it and you can get better at doing it. And some people will be a lot better than other people at it.
You also said in the book that with the help of AI, we'll see more, one-man company. And also, for the first time in human history, we'll be able to manage tens of thousands of people at once.
Right.
What kinds of jobs will we see with one-man company, and what kinds of areas or industries we will see with, thousands of people working together?
Yeah, it's a great question. I fully expect, probably within 25 years, that one person will be able to make a feature-length movie by themselves. The whole thing, all the actors, all the camera angles, all the sets, all the soundtrack, one person. And like writing a novel, like J.K. Rowling, who one person, 7 books, incredible world. She made lots of money, was very popular. One person that their movies could be a hit. With 1 million people, I think you could build things like you could build, a quantum computer that worked, or you could build something very, very technical that required the intelligence and diligence and the energy of 1 million people working together, collaborating. So we don't have a way right now to have 1 million people collaborate. We have a company like Amazon or others who have 1 million employees, but they're not really collaborating on one task. But I think we could have 1 million people collaborating on building a rocket to Mars, designing it, testing it. And you can't do that in one space. You can't do it with today's technology because we don't have a way to match the person with the skills at that moment with the problem. We need AI and other tools to match and enable that collaboration. It's a very sophisticated thing that we don't have tools for or even the knowledge of how to do it. But that's what we could look forward to. So they could be designing a home-based nuclear power plant that could work in your backyard. And there are 1 million of them working on this single problem.
You said one way to predict the future is to look at what rich and powerful men are enjoying. Because with technology, that could be democratized and, the mass majority of people will enjoy that as well. So if, for example, with the help of AI, we could all have a very capable personal assistant, just like what rich and powerful men do now, what will these rich and powerful people have that we don't in the AI era?
I think one thing is that they surround themselves only with humans.
What a luxury.
Right, exactly. That's a luxury. One of the questions, what I don't have a good answer to is whether they have more kids. If you have billions of dollars and are enabled that, would you have more kids? So far, the evidence is that's not happening. That's one possibility. I think the other thing that the rich would tend to do is to change jobs often. Typically, to go through 3 or 4 serious careers with the depth that we would have in one career for most people. So I think the rich would have multiple careers. I think they would also use that money to try and show status in new ways. Oftentimes, they might try and disguise their wealth. I think in the future, that's what we're seeing is people who dress with sweatpants and, I think there'll be lots of ones where we invert the image of the wealthy in 25 years could be inverted in some ways, like not dressing up. But mostly what we're going to see, I think, is an emphasis on not dealing with surrounding themselves with other humans.
Did you and your co-author use AI in any ways to help you write the book?
No, we didn't, except in this one way. The book was derived from 30 hours of conversation with me in English. We used AI to make a Chinese translation of it that he used, the editor, to edit in. So that was the major use of AI in the book, but the rest of the actual writing was done without AI.
So AI is still doing very basic work right now for you guys. But you said in the book that in the future, content creation will be very different because of AI. Now, I want you to imagine yourself being in the year of 2049. And how would you create content differently then?
What I think it's going to be like is I will have maybe 25 AI interns, assistants, who I'm using them for different purposes because they have different strengths. The process would be, in Hollywood, they have something called a writer's room. So it's not like one person writing it. There's a whole room of writing it. So I would have my own writer's room. And as a group, we're writing this piece. That's for writing to a human audience. But there's another part where I'm writing to either myself, an audience of one, or I'm writing to AIs themselves. So the audience of one is sort of like I've been writing with co-authoring very, very elaborate fictional world-building worlds that are historical fiction that I don't even want to share to anyone else because I don't care, but because I just had the enjoyment of co-writing it. It's like better than reading it or watching a movie was me creating it. There's a lot of the content that's going to be generated only for me. It's like journaling. It's like sketchbook. It's like you sketch in a sketchbook because you enjoy the sketching. Necessarily want to show it. So there's a lot. So I'll be generating entire movies or books that are my sketchbook. That's the audience of one. That's another kind of content. And then there's writing for the AIs. For the AIs because I don't necessarily expect people to read it, but the AIs will be reading it. And so when they answer a question, I want to influence how they answer the question. So I'll use my AI to generate contents that other AIs are going to read and influence them. So in a certain sense, I am more interested in influencing how people think indirectly by influencing the AI that they're using. I'm aiming to write for the AIs.
So you're saying there are two things that AI can't replace humans. First is the enjoyment process, because we'll be creating content that will make us happy. And then the second part is we are going to manage these AIs. We are going to give directions to these AIs. Do you use any AI products on a regular basis?
I do. I'm using some AI right now to generate a movie from a graphic novel, which is still images. So I'm using it. There's a bunch of, like a panel, like a page, and I'm using those images to make a movie out of a graphic novel. And it's very frustrating, I have to tell you. If you use them every day, you realize the idea that them taking over is crazy because they're not very obedient. I call them dumb schmarten. Dumb schmarten is my word for them being incredibly smart in some things and incredibly stupid. It's the same thing, can be brilliant and dumb at the same time. And it's very frustrating in that sense of like, they just don't get it. And I'm trying to again and again and again and again. So it's a lot of work still. Nonetheless, it's amazing. I could never do it myself, but it's just not like you just magically do it. There's hours and hours and hours. And so when I was 2 years ago, I did one AI art a day. And people think, well, that's, you just do it once. No, I spent an hour of going around and around and around for each piece. So I was very happy to call myself a co-creator because I put a lot of effort into, like photography. When photography first came along, the painter said, oh, you're just pushing a button. But everybody knows that photography is not just pushing the button. You are spending a lot of time setting it up, looking for the right one, the right time, the moment, the lighting. There's a lot more than pushing the button. And the same thing with AI art. It's not just clicking, it's skill. There's an incredible amount of skill. And the same thing by making this graphic novel into a movie, there's an incredible amount of work and skill that still goes on. And so that's one of the things I'm using on a daily basis.
Are there any products from China that impress you?
Yeah, they're very similar. DeepSeek, Manus, they're the same. I haven't seen that much difference. The question is, will there be any difference over time? And we don't know. Both stories are plausible. I could imagine a convergence where, like an airplane, there's only so many ways you can go. Most airplanes in the world, whether they're made by Airbus or Boeing, are very similar. or even the Chinese ones. Or it could be that there's huge cultural differences between. We simply don't know yet.
Speaking of China and America, I wonder what you think these two countries' relationship will be like in the AI era. Are we going to be enemies, frenemies, or, friends?
The book 2049 is not really a book of predictions. It's a book of scenarios. And so part of what I'm trying to do with the book is to offer up some optimistic scenarios of the way we would like the future to be, because we have a lot of choice in the character of the AI, even though we don't have a choice about AI. AI is going to come, but the character of the AI is a choice we have. And so we want to be as optimistic as we possibly can to imagine a future that we like and to imagine that we can make it, because that's the only way we're going to get a future that we like. We're not going to get it accidentally. This book is trying to imagine scenarios for the future of China and the US that are optimistic. And I think one of the things that would make that future happen is if China continued to make the very best things in the world that were top notch, the best of something, and everybody in the world wanted to buy it. It was like the iPhone equivalent, where it's just the best, even though China made it, but it would be designed in China. It would be created, designed, manufactured. And that would go a long way to making China cool in the eyes of Americans. And I think one of the ingredients of having coolness is having a place that people want to live. So I've been trying to imagine what could China do where people in America would want to live in China? What would it take? It's like in the way that there's a lot of Americans who live in Tokyo. They love living in Tokyo. What would it take to have I would just love to live in China? And so there would be a lot of work that would have to be done to make that. But even without Americans, there still could be other people in the world, in Africa, others, who would love to work in China. And part of it, I think, one of the things that you would have is you would have these earbuds with AI in them that would do real-time translation. So one of the things about working and living in China is you have to master Chinese, which is pretty tough for most Americans. But if you had earbuds that did the translation in real time perfectly, going both ways, then a lot of people in the world might want to come live in China.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because, I used to live in Europe, and I think when China somehow finds a modern way to express our rich culture and history, that's when we become super contagious and attractive. Just like, the video game Black Myth Wukong.
Yeah.
That's a great example of how we somehow find a way through tech to express our rich culture in a very modern way.
That's for export, but there's also a lot to be done internally to make the cities most livable, to make them attractive to people with families, to all kinds of things. And so China's gone a long way to make very livable cities, but there's still a long way to go.
We all know that the relationship between China and America is pretty tricky. We've seen the American government banning Huawei and, stopping NVIDIA to sell chips to China. But in your book, you actually mentioned that the fierce AI competition between China and America might actually push these countries to strengthen their cooperation in certain areas. So what exactly are these areas?
I would say a couple of things. One is I think Trump is a symptom of a larger problem with happening in America, which is that, for over a century, maybe even longer, 2 centuries, America has had an image of itself as being, we call it exceptionalism. It's supposedly different from all the other countries of the world. We're special. We're the superpower. We're the only superpower. We are shaping the world in other countries. And that is under revision right now. It's a very hard psychological blow for Americans. And independent of Trump, they would be uncomfort and difficulty right now. And that's only going to be getting worse because China is rising and it's showing that it's in fact appear at least. I think China's going to get back to the moon before Americans. It's going to reach Mars before the Americans. These are going to be really deep psychological blows. That's the subtext of what's going on with the rise of China, is that Americans have to absorb this bitter lesson, and it's going to be difficult. At the same time, China is maturing. It's been a very fast-growing adolescent, but it has to mature, and that's going to be very difficult and painful. And so America and China were married at a very young age. And so now they're having to figure out how they can live with each other, and both of them are undergoing stress. So it's going to be difficult. But I think they need each other and they complement each other.
There is a metaphor in this book that I find very interesting. You said maybe in the future, the relationship between China and America would be like a bad marriage. They don't really get on. They don't really like each other, but because they have a common goal, they have a kid. They have to cooperate. That's a very possible outcome. And you also mention in this fierce competition between China and America, India might be the super mistress for America. And India might be the ultimate winner because the most profitable company might come from India. Why is that the case?
Because of scale, because of ambition. A lot of the things you can say about China, you can say about India. It's very long, uninterrupted history, very much hustle, people very, very educated, billions of people together who've lifted themselves out of poverty. There's an Indian diaspora, which is all around the world, just like the Chinese diaspora, a lot of overseas Indian. And you have this very complicated network of Indians infiltrating all the countries of the world. So it has many of the same kinds of things as China, but it's just like 20 years, 30 years behind. So it's going to go through the same kind of adolescence that China went through. And so potentially India could serve as a partner for America if China was unwilling or if China wanted a divorce. India is there. There's a very favorable relationship with India, and India is cooler than China.
In what ways?
Bollywood. India is the new bride, the new girl on the block, right? So so there's a little bit more infatuation, and the fact that it's democracy is also cool to Americans. The fact that you have this enormous, chaotic mess of a country that still has a democracy, that's also cool for a lot of Americans. So India has a lot of the potential that China has had 20 or 30 years ago. And again, if China's now a willing partner, India might be a substitute.
You've been to China many times and you're also married to a Taiwanese woman. Is there anything super cool about China that you find that we can explore and make the world see?
Hardest thing to convey to most Americans about China is its scale of the urban development, of the urban civilization that it's made. The fact that it's fairly recently constructed, so it's like kind of brand new. And it works much better in most respects than the US in terms of trains, subways, delivery system, WeChat, mobile. It's a better infrastructure. That's really hard to kind of convey to people how cool that is to have that level of convenience. The other thing that's hard to convey to Americans is the safety and security aspect, the non-crime. I mean, there's a cost to that, which is evident. Chinese that I've met are willing to pay that cost for that safety. But nonetheless, it's incredibly impressive how safe China is, and that most Americans don't really understand that.
We talked about cultural differences, and I saw you saying in one of the interviews that you and your wife have pretty different views on education. For example, your wife thinks it's essential for your kids to go to a good uni, whereas you just think, if they don't go to college, it's fine. So in the AI era, do you think the Chinese ways of thinking, the Chinese education system is better suited, or the American?
I have to think the American. I might have to put some nuance. I think maybe the more elementary level education, the Chinese way is better. But once you get to high school, the American way is better. And that's because in this age of AI, if you want answers, you just ask a machine. And China's still very much education is stressing answers, having the right answer, getting the right answer. And that's not a skill that's going to be important. Asking the right question, that's the skill. Being able to ask a great question, that's a skill. And I think the American system is a little bit better at teaching that, where you are questioning authority. You don't accept what people say. You prove it. Show it to me. I think you're wrong. I don't believe that. I think there's a cost to being innovative, and I think America pays that price, which is there's a little bit more chaos. There's a little bit more insecurity. There's a little bit less safety. There's a little bit more failure. And in that sense, trying to be too secure and too safe. To me, I'm amazed at the people who go through the Chinese education, and they've been really creative when they come to the U.S. Why is that? What's the difference? If they stayed in China, they wouldn't be as creative as they are in the U.S. It's like, is it the water? No, I think there's a little cultural component where they are encouraged to take chances and risk and question things that they aren't at home.
In the AI era, do you think the purpose of education will change significantly?
I hope so. My hope is that, one, education needs to be much more self-paced. I think there's really only one major skill that students should be graduating from, and that is the ability to learn and knowing how they learn, optimizing their own learning, because for the rest of their life, you're going to be learning. You're going to be changing your minds. You're going to be having to unlearn stuff. So I think AI can absolutely help us with that by, again, taking on some of the chores that we have been educated for in the past, like trying to make answers to complicated questions.
Here's a big question for you. Do you think AI will improve or worsen inequality?
It may not surprise you that I think it will
improve.
It's too early to tell. Like, what's the evidence? AI's been around for 5 years. I don't detect a significant increase in inequality in that 5 years that we could blame on AI. There's a greater chance than zero that it could worsen it, but I think the evidence so far is that it will make it better.
I don't have any research to back up my intuition, but my gut feeling is that people at the bottom of the hierarchy, their life is going to be much better because of technology. But in the absolute, the discrepancy between people at the top and at the bottom, the gap is going to be even bigger, because as we see it again and again, technology is something that would accelerate and amplify our capacities, our desires, and our tendencies.
Here's a funny thing. So, as you mentioned, I get to hang around with some of the richest people on the planet, highest of the high, the billionaires. They have exactly the same iPhone that you have. Their iPhone is not 1 billion times better. They're using the same AIs you are. Their AIs are not 1 billion times better. Their clothes are not 1 billion times better. Even though the numbers in their bank account would suggest enormous discrepancies, their actual lives, what they do in their lives, is not 1 billion times different. So focusing on that number in the bank account beyond a certain point just doesn't make that much difference.
How about the opportunity differences?
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that sort of money is overrated in this world. Opportunity is a better metric, but you're still limited by the opportunities by the number of hours in your day. And so your bank account's not limited by how many zeros you can have, but your opportunities are definitely limited by how many hours you have. This is my observation of hanging around with these people. It'd be very hard to tell them apart from just an ordinarily rich person versus the richest people on the planet. I mean, it's like there's no significant real difference. When you're a billionaire, everything is free. You have to be clear about that. Everything, literally everything is free. You simply can't spend the money fast enough. I'm just saying there's a weird natural limit at the high end where if you looked at the zeros, you would say, well, the gap is increasing. I don't think the high end gap is increasing. And we know that the lower end is rising over time. We're all kind of amazed by Elon Musk's his role in politics, but people who are amazed by that aren't very well versed in American history and the role of the richest people in the country in the past was far greater than Elon's role.
It's interesting that you say, the richest people and me have the same iPhones, have the same hardware. And you also mentioned in your book that one day smart, AI glasses will take over smartphones. How far are we from that future?
25 years. The smart glasses thing is going to take decades. And I say that because it takes a decade for things to go from the laboratory into commercial success. What was the path from the iPhone to ubiquitous iPhone? That was at least a decade. Yeah, I mean, it's just 20 years ago. It's like at least 10 years before it became ubiquitous. So, and so right now there is no smart glasses that's anywhere near that. So it's going to, by the time it does arrive, it's still going to take another 10 years for it to penetrate. So it's several decades away.
And in your opinion, what kind of company is going to make this popular AI glasses that's akin to the iPhone 4? Is it going to be existing companies or, a newcomer?
Well, it could be an existing company like XReal or something, but it's unlikely to be the big, the big mega. It's not going to be Amazon, Baidu, Tencent, Google. It's not going to be any of the established ones. It'll be a startup, but it could exist now. It could be now, or it could be brand new. It'll seem to come out of nowhere. And at the beginning, people will dismiss it as sort of a toy, not serious. And which is true for when Toyota first came up, when Microsoft first started, they're all dismissed as toys. I would bet that it's not any of the established companies. And I think also I would bet that it's going to be a Chinese company because I think they have the right mix of technical know-how and maybe some experience by that time. And China's really working hard on their design talents. And I think that's what we'll see.
Mm-hmm. AI is definitely going to affect our life in many ways. And one way you mentioned in the book, it might help us live healthier and longer. But one price we have to pay is to make our personal health data transparent to the system. So we could get, for example, highly personalized treatments. I can imagine so many problems associated with this. I think it's very different from giving out our shopping preferences, our browsing preferences. So where's the fine line between personal security and, being transparent and getting great AI services?
Whenever we give people a chance to move the slider between personalization and transparency and obscurity and privacy and generic treatment, people always push it all the way to maximum personalization. I mean, I think basically people are going to pay the cost for maximum personalization.
I'm going to give you a scenario I could think of. For example, if my health data is transparent, right? there's a very rich and powerful man in need of a new kidney. He's going to hunt me down.
Uh-huh.
The same can be said about a desperate mom needing blood or kidney or whatever for her kid. Yeah. She is going to hunt me down.
I think for a while that may be a problem, but the solution is to make an artificial kidney. We shouldn't have things that we steal from other people. So yes, I think that might be a short-term thing, but I would say with AI, we use AI to help develop a way to make an alternative, a kidney that maybe you can engineer from an animal that is just as good or whatever. I don't think that's a long-term issue of people desperately wanting your organs. That's like a Black Mirror.
But what you're saying is, unless resources are sufficient, we should be very careful about giving out our very personal data. Is that right?
No, I think the world would be better if most of the data was public. I think your DNA should be public.
You don't see any danger?
One of the most personal things about your body, your face. It's unique. Facial recognition works because your face is unique out of the billions of people on the planet. It's the most personal, and it's the most public thing about you. It's public. Something can be both your personal thing and the public at the same time. Public and personal are not in contradiction to each other. By sharing it and sharing everything about you, it would be a huge boon to medicine. One of the things that it could do was there are tons and tons of drugs that are abandoned because they don't work for everybody. But they do work really well for a small set of people. And if you could isolate them by their genes, we could sort out and say, okay, here's a drug, and if you have this gene set, you can take the drug and it'll work on you. So that's an example of why sharing that data is so important.
I can see the benefits of it. Is there any area that we should be very careful about giving out data?
I don't think so. To go further on that, I think that in America, we should the amount of taxes that you pay, the total amount of taxes that you pay to the federal government should be public. I think that would really help everybody. Like you would see that Trump doesn't pay any taxes. It was like there are probably secretaries who pay more taxes than Trump does. And I think if that was public, it would really help reduce the discrepancy. So I think what I'm trying to do with the scenarios is engage people's imaginations to kind of imagine a world of self-driving cars that you want to have. And to aim for that, not to be too worried about the downsides, not because they're not there, only because everybody else is telling you about the downsides. So there's no shortage of downsides in the pictures of how things fail. It's just that we don't need to spend any more energy on that. We need to spend more energy on imagining how we make the things work and what would happen if they worked well. What would happen if everything went right?
I think this is a beautiful message from the book because a lot of times you do have to dream it and see it first before you can build it and get it. You know, the title of this book is 2049. There is another very famous book that uses a specific year as the title. That's George Orwell's 1984. And even for people who haven't read that book yet, we know it's about, Big Brother's watching you. If you could have one important takeaway for people to remember about this book, what would it be?
The role of optimism and why you should be as optimistic as you possibly can, and why today's world has been shaped by the optimistic views of people in the past who everything in your room was made by somebody who was optimistically and passionate about something that other people didn't think could ever exist. So the world is made up of passion projects of people in the past. And so I'm trying to encourage you, the reader, to be as optimistic as you possibly can so that you can shape the future. Because the future is going to be shaped by people who are optimistic. And so if you want to be one of those people shaping the future, try to be as optimistic as you possibly can.
I consider myself an optimistic person as well, so I completely agree with you. But at the same time, I'm thinking, is this optimism a very American thing? I lived in France for a while, and French people, are very famous for being pessimistic and whiny. But that also has, great things coming out of it. Van Gogh said, pain is what brings beautiful art.
Yeah, no, it may be very American. However, right up until COVID, I felt that the Chinese culture, the young people, were even more optimistic than the typical American young person. COVID took a real blow to a lot of that optimism. One of the reasons why I think China and American can be partners is because I think there's also a lot of optimism in China.
That's true. You've done a lot of very cool things from an early age. I know that in your 20s and 30s, you travel across Asia and you cycle across America. Is there any advice you'd like to give to the younger generation?
Yeah, I do have a couple of bits of advice for young people. One I mentioned earlier was, if at all possible, try to work in an area where there's no language or name for what it is that you're doing. If you have a chance, try and spend some time living as cheaply or as poorly as you can with almost no money in a very deliberate choice, a limited time, in order to experience what the worst case would be. Believe me, if you're able to take a year off for 6 months and live on a few yen, just eating rice and beans and sleeping on the floor, what happens is that at the end of that time, you realize it wasn't so bad, and that you're willing to take a risk to do something, because you say, if I failed, the worst is that I would be reduced to living the way I have past year, and it wasn't so bad. So I'm not as afraid to take a big risk because I've already lived the worst that can happen, and I'm not afraid of that anymore.
That's such a great advice. And that reminds me of what Elon Musk said before as well. He said in his college days, he made himself to only spend $1 a day for a month. And he said if he could do that, he would be able to find a company. He would be able to live in very extreme conditions. And he did it. And now look what he's doing.
Right. Exactly. And the other piece of advice, the third piece that I would say, is two other pieces. One is, let me say, is that the thing that made you weird as a kid can make you great as an adult as long as you don't lose it. So hang on to that. Whatever that weirdness is that you had as a kid, and every kid is weird, you want to hang on to that really special thing. The fourth one is that if at all possible, spend a year of your life doing things that are not remotely productive, that will not help your career, that seem crazy, stupid, dangerous, waste of time, all those things that will look as unproductive as possible. And that time will become your muse for the future success. You'll come back to that time many, many times, because that period of unproductivity, you'll be doing things out of your own joy or passion, and not because you're trying to earn money or whatever. And that, again, is where you want to be successful. You don't want to be driven by money. You want to be driven by other things. And so you want to let go of that to see if you can surface some of the other things that are not about money, which is very, very hard if you're on a career path, going through college and getting your first job and whatnot. You don't have time to think about those things. But if you can escape from that and try and see if you can uncover some things that are playful, that are a joy, that you do only because you want to do them, and they are not trying to do anything productive about it, that little hint will come back later when you do have to make a career.
What a great ending to our conversation. Thanks for all the advice. And thank you for being on our show. I hope I get to talk to you and pick your brain one day again soon.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed our conversation, and
Thank
I hope
you
I was
so
useful
much.
in some way.
Yes, it is. It is. And like I said before, my dad will be so thrilled that we have this conversation. And he said hi because he's a big fan of yours. And as one of the first tech people in China, he's heavily influenced by you.
Well, hello, Dad.